So I think we're good to go now. So good evening and welcome to our virtual Committee of Adjustment meeting. On your screen, you'll see members of our Committee of Adjustment, and behind the scenes, you won't see them, but you will hear them chime in from time to time. We have many staff members with us this evening who have worked hard to make this meeting possible. Our Secretary Treasurer is Lindsay Stamen, and our Clerk is Derek O'Shea. And they've worked hard to make this meeting possible. Now, the agenda and the schedules for the meeting have been posted on Dash on the city's website. So if you don't have those documents and you'd like to follow along, you might want to access them now. We have 3 agenda items this evening, and I'd like to share with you the format that I'm going to be using to navigate through each application. I'll start by introducing an applicant and or their agent, and I'll ask them to add anything further to the material we have before us. If you're the applicant or the agent and you have nothing further to add, then just simply jump in and say that you don't have anything further, and then we can just move on quickly. Next, I'll invite members of the committee to ask questions of either the applicant or the agent, after which we'll open the public portion of the meeting. Now, it's during the public portion of the meeting, I invite members of the public to ask questions or make comments in respect of the application. But don't expect an immediate response to a question or comment at this point. What we do is we gather and we record the questions and comments, and it's only after I close the public portion of the meeting will the questions and comments be addressed by the applicant, agent, or staff. And that's step number 4. And after they've had an opportunity to address those comments, I turn it back to the committee. I ask them to make a motion. We deliberate on the application and then make an ultimate decision. And I rinse and repeat. We use the same format for every application this evening. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Now, if you have a personal interest in any particular application and you'd like to receive written notice of tonight's decision, then please send an email with your name and address to our Secretary Treasurer, Lindsay Stamen. Her email address is lsthamann@cityofkingston.ca. Be sure to include your full name, your address, and the file number of the application. Lindsay will include you in a database and be sure to keep you updated about tonight's decision or any other decisions moving forward. And so that's pretty much about it. So at this point, I'd like to call on Derek, our clerk, to confirm quorum. Derek?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will confirm that we have quorum. We do have regrets from Jordan Tekanos Levy, as well. Blaine Fudge and Somnath Sinha are not at the meeting yet. I'll also advise that in attendance from staff, we have James Barr, the Manager of Development Approvals, Megan Robidoux, Intermediate Planner, Ian Clendenning, Senior Planner, Inji Kim, Planner, Lindsay Stamen, the Secretary Treasurer for the Committee of Adjustment and Planner, as well as Julia McCautry-Jansman, who is our meeting host. We have 4 agents and applicants in attendance, as well as 4 members of the public. And I turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thanks very much and welcome everybody. So at this point, I'd like to call the meeting to order at 5:33 p.m. and refer you to the agenda. Okay, so everybody's had a chance to review the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? So moved by Greg and seconded by Paul. Any discussion? So all in favor, raise your hands. And that's unanimously carried. Thank you very much. All right, so confirmation of the minutes of the October 18th meeting. I think everybody's had an opportunity to review them. All right, so can I have a motion to approve? So it's moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion? None at all. So all in favor, raise your hands, and that would be carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? No. No disclosure. Okay, I see head shaking no, so there are none. We have no delegations and there are no requests for deferral. And furthermore, we have no returning deferred items. So our first piece of new business is actually item 8A. So Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Our first application tonight is for minor variance and consent at 1338 Princess Street. The file numbers associated with the application are D13057-2021 and D10032-2021. Megan Robidoux will give a brief presentation on behalf of the city.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Okay, my name is Megan Robidoux, and I'm the planner who's been processing this application for a minor variance and consent for 1338 Princess Street. The purpose of the consent application is to permit the severance of the subject lands along the existing driveway to result in one severed and one retained lot. Minor variances and easements are also sought in support of the proposed severance. Next slide, please. The subject property is situated on the south side of Princess Street. The property is currently designated as arterial commercial and residential in the official plan and is zoned site-specific B2 and site-specific B3 zone in zoning bylaw number 8499. The subject property is located adjacent to a variety of residential and commercial uses, ranging from 1 to 2 stories in height. The subject property is currently occupied by a townhouse development, which is owned and operated by Kingston Cooperative Homes. Next slide. The city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment was approved by council for the northeast portion of the subject property on June 22nd of this year to permit the development of a 3-story multiple residential building containing 38 affordable housing units, which is shown here. Following the approval of the rezoning, the city initiated a land division process, which will have the result of transferring a portion of the rezoned lands to the Cooperative Housing Federation's ownership and merging these lands with the existing cooperative lands at 1338 Princess Street. An agreement of purchase and sale has been prepared, and the land transfer is scheduled to be completed on November 30th. A condition of approval is recommended in Exhibit B to require the completion of the land transfer in advance of issuance of the certificate of official. A site plan control application for the proposed development has also been submitted and is currently undergoing technical review. Next slide, please. The applicant, Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada, relies on funding obtained from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation to support the development of affordable housing. The CMHC has advised that establishing 2 separate conveyable parcels will support the necessary funding process for the recently approved 3-story residential development. As such, the applicant has submitted concurrent consent and minor variance applications to facilitate the creation of 2 separate conveyable parcels, one containing the existing townhouse development, which is outlined here in red, and the other to contain the proposed 3-story multiple residential building that was recently approved by council. And this is outlined in yellow here, if you can see that. Vehicular and pedestrian access is currently provided to the site via a private driveway off of Princess Street. The application for consent to sever will result in severing the existing driveway, with each parcel having 1 lane within their property boundary. As a result, a consent application to establish a legal right-of-way over the driveway is also proposed to permit the severed and retained lots to maintain their current use of the private driveway. 2 servicing easements are also proposed as part of this consent application. A servicing easement within the front yard of the severed lot in favor of the retained lot is proposed to provide a water servicing connection across the severed from Princess Street in favor of the retained. This is shown in blue. A servicing easement is also proposed across the retained lot in favor of the severed lot to provide a sanitary connection from the severed lot to the retained lot. And this is shown in the gray crosshatching. Next slide, please. A minor variance is requested to permit a driveway width of 3.8 meters or 54%, pardon me, of the lot width, where a maximum driveway width of 40% of the lot width is permitted. A minor variance is also requested to permit a lot occupancy of 63.4% on the retained lands, where a maximum lot occupancy of 35% is permitted in the existing site-specific B2 zone. So this would be in recognition of the existing condition of that retained portion. Next slide, please. Pursuant to the requirements of the Planning Act, a notice of statutory public meeting was provided by advertisement in the form of signs posted on the subject site 14 days in advance of this meeting. In addition, notices were sent by mail to 64 property owners within 60 meters of the subject property, and a courtesy notice was placed in the Kingston WIG standard. No public correspondence has been received regarding these applications. Next slide, please. The proposed consent has regard for matters under subsection 5124 of the Planning Act. The applications are consistent with the provincial policy statement, conform with all applicable policies of the official plan, and are in keeping with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The proposed variances meet all 4 tests under subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act. The proposal represents good land use planning and is being recommended for approval subject to the proposed conditions. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions regarding these applications. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks very much for that. All right. So at this point, I'd like to call on the applicant or their agent to introduce yourself by name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Yuko Leclerc. I'm a planner with Foten Planning and Design. Trying to turn on my camera and I can't, so I apologize for that. Okay. I am here this evening. Oh, there we go. Thank you so much.
There you are.
I'm here. Hi, everyone. I'm here this evening on behalf of the owners, and there are a number of other representatives from the ownership here. I'd just like to say that I've reviewed the recommendation report from staff and have nothing to add, no questions or concerns, and agree with the recommendation. But I am here this evening if there are any questions from the committee or the public. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks very much for that. So committee members, do you have any questions for Mr. Leclerc or staff members? No, I just have one question. It's about the easements. Have they already been granted, or is that just more of a clerical issue along the way?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So those easements are something that's been identified through this process. They'll be required as a result of the proposed severance of the property. So it is something that would be granted through the current consent application that is requested.
Got it. Okay. Thanks very much. All right, so there are no other questions from committee members, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 1338 Princess Street? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom, and I'll have an opportunity to bring you into the meeting. Do we have any members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 1338 Princess Street? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And I'll call the third and final time. Do we have any members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 1338 Princess Street? Please raise your virtual hand. And I'm seeing none. I don't see any panelists either. So I'll just come back to the committee and I'll ask for a motion. So moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion? No. So all in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimously carried. Thanks very much. Okay, so the next application we have is number 8B, which is an application for minor variance. Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance, file number D13056-2021 at 4672 Highway 15. Ingi Kim will give the presentation on behalf of the city for this application.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This application is for a minor variance at 4672 Highway 15. The purpose of the application is to construct a detached accessory building within the side yard of the property. The proposed use for the building is a garage, a storage, and a loft with no habitable space. Next slide, please. A variance is requested to seek reduction to the minimum interior side yard with provision. Section 23 of zoning bylaw number 32-74 states that the minimum interior side yard width for any building or structure shall be 12 meters. The applicant is seeking a variance of 10.8 meters as the proposed accessory building is located 1.2 meters from the side lot line. Next slide, please. The subject property is designated rural in the official plan and zoned restricted rural A1 zone in zoning bylaw number 32-74. The property abuts provincial highway number 15 to the southeast, a single family dwelling to the southwest, and vacant lands to the north and to the east. The subject property is currently developed with a single family dwelling. Next slide, please. The size of the subject property is considered to be small in a rural area context. Due to the site's smaller size, the larger setbacks intended for rural lots do not make efficient use of the land. The requested variance is more in keeping with the setbacks found on smaller residential lots. The minor variance will allow the accessory building to be located closer to the lot line, leaving more room on the site for outdoor amenities and for site's functional needs such as septic system. Further, the proposed accessory building is anticipated to have no impact on the existing streetscape as it is located more than 90 meters away from the Highway 15. Next slide, please. The location and the scale of the proposal is compatible with the surrounding residential uses and will not result in significant impacts or changes to the surrounding area. There is no increase in density or intensity of uses as no dwelling units are proposed. And no adverse effects, loss of privacy are anticipated as the proposed building is more than 50 meters away from the budding residential property. And there is no dwelling to the east of the property. Next slide, please. With respect to public consultation, a public notice sign was posted, a notice was mailed to 7 property owners, and notification was made available in Kingston Week Standard. And to date, no public comments have been received. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the application is being recommended for approval to allow the construction of a new detached accessory building in the side yard of the subject property. The requested variance maintains the general intent and purpose of both City of Kingston's official plan and zoning bylaw number 3274. Further, the requested variance is minor in nature and the proposed accessory building represents good land use planning and will improve the function of the existing residential use on site. To that end, thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions regarding this application.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kim. All right. So I'll ask at this point for the applicant or their agent to identify yourselves by name and address, please.
Good evening. It's Rod Stokes. I'm the agent for the owners. My address is 324 Kingston, Ontario.
Okay. Anything further you wish to add to the application?
Nothing really. I'd be glad to address any questions that might arise.
Perfect. Committee members, do you have any questions for Mr. Stokes or for staff? So Paul. I see your hand raised.
So could you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yep.
Perfect. I really wasn't sure, and this is maybe to staff, where the actual garage or structure is to be located on the property. When I'm looking at the drawings, it didn't really jump out at me where on the lot. So if they could point that out, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. If you look at the site plan, there are 2 black blocks on the site plan, and it is
that page 45, Ingi?
I believe. Yes, on 45. Yes.
Page 45. Okay.
Yeah, and it is a building on the further right. It's the location of the proposed building.
Okay.
So would that be on the west side of the property line?
So that would be on the northeast of the site.
Northeast, okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so definitely away from Highway 15 is what I understand.
Yes, it is 90 meters away from the Highway 15,
Okay.
and the permit for MTO has been granted.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thanks for that. Any other questions from committee members? None. Okay, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. So do we have any members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 4672 Highway 15? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And we still have people in the public gallery. So do we have anybody with us this evening who wishes to speak to the application for 4672 Highway 15? Raise your virtual hand. And third and final call, if you have any comments or questions in respect to 4672 Highway 15, raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And seeing none, I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Greg and seconded by Paul. Any discussion on this? No, very straightforward, I found. So all in favor, raise your hand, physical hand, and that's carried unanimously. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, and our third and final item on the agenda is item number 8C, which is an application for minor variance. Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance at 310 Sydenham Street. The file number is D13059-2021. Ian Clendenning is the planner assigned to this application, and he will give the presentation.
Very good. Welcome, Ian.
Good evening, everyone. And through the chair, my name is Ian Clendenning, and I'm the planner that will be presenting this application located at 310 Sydenham Street. Could we go to the next slide, please? Great. So the purpose and effect of this application is to construct a detached accessory dwelling unit. In order to permit the development, variances are sought to allow for an increase in lot coverage, increase it including for accessory buildings, and to allow for a greater height than otherwise permitted. Next slide. The illustrations here show the context, the neighborhood context map and a key map. The property is an irregularly shaped lot, which is wider in the back and a lot frontage of approximately 13 meters on Sydenham Street. The lot measures approximately 416 square meters in area and is designated residential in the official plan and zoned 1 family dwelling and 2 family dwelling, or A, in zoning bylaw 8499. It happens to be located within the St. Lawrence Ward Heritage Character Area. Heritage Planning has reviewed the application and has no concerns. Next slide. To permit the proposed accessory dwelling unit, variances are being sought to allow for a maximum lot coverage, which is greater than otherwise permitted in the A zone. Specifically, a total lot coverage of 43% is being proposed, with a lot coverage for accessory buildings being 20.3%, whereas 33 1/3 and 10% are otherwise the maximums permitted. Additionally, on April 6, 2021, Council passed bylaw number 2021-63, which amended zoning bylaw number 8499, in which dealt in part with accessory dwelling units. This bylaw was subsequently appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal and sets out a maximum height of 4.6 meters for an accessory dwelling unit. In the event that that appeal is withdrawn or is refused, the in-force date is deemed to be April 6, 2021, the day council passed it. As such, a further variance would be required, and the applicant seeks approval of this variance to permit the accessory dwelling unit measuring the proposed 5.4 meters in height. I would highlight that the proposal does comply with the existing bylaw provisions. If we could go to the next slide, please. So here we have a site plan showing the proposed building, the footprint covering 42.9 square meters beyond what would otherwise be permitted, or about 400 square feet beyond the permitted lot coverage of 10%. So highlighting that while this is a doubling of the maximum coverage for accessory structures, the impact is not seen to be that large, given that it's only roughly 430 square feet in increase over what's otherwise permitted, as well as the irregularly shaped lot that widens out in the back. It minimizes the amount that it is seen from the front. If we could go to the next slide, please. Here we have elevations. Again, referencing that the proposed building is 5.4 meters. That's 0.8 meters above the proposed amended zoning bylaw as amended by bylaw number 2021-63, currently under appeal. That is relatively minor numerically and in its impact, as this still serves as an accessory dwelling unit. It's not representative of overmassing of the property. For that reason, staff feel that this is minor in nature. We could go to the next slide. This illustrates the floor plan of the layout, which is 3-bedroom unit. You'll note in the recommended conditions, we are asking that the committee include in the conditions a maximum of 3-bedroom units as put before this committee and consistent with the proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw. If we could go to the next slide, please. So for public consultation with respect to this application, a sign was posted on the property. Notice was mailed out to 57 property owners that are located within 60 meters of the subject property, as well as a courtesy ad was placed in the WIG standard at the time of presentation, and there were no comments received. Accordingly, given the above, staff feel that this is consistent with the intent of the provincial policy statement, conforms with the provincial policy statement. It's minor in nature, complies with the general intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw 8499, and it is a desirable and appropriate use as a land, building, or structure. Accordingly, it meets out the tests set out in section 45(1) of the Planning Act, and staff are recommending approval subject to the proposed conditions. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much, Ian. All right. At this point, I'd like to call on the applicant or their agent to identify yourselves by name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Hugo Leclerc. I'm a planner with Foten Planning and Design, and I am here this evening representing the owner who is also in attendance. I have read the report and the recommendation from staff and have no concerns, and I agree with the recommendations, but of course I am here to help answer any questions or comments should there be any.
Very good. Thanks for that. Committee members, do you have any questions for Mr. Leclerc or staff? Okay, so Paul, you have a question? I see your hand raised.
So could you hear me?
I sure can. Yeah.
I'm a little confused, Mr. Chair, on variance number 3. So obviously the bylaw number 2021-63 was approved by council, and I understand it's currently being with the Ontario Land Tribunal. And the variance here is around maximum height, the structure. I'm just wondering how we're sort of going to be voting here on this one. So in the event it is not approved by the Ontario Land Tribunal, does that, I'm not sure how this process is sort of going to unfold. So maybe staff could sort of explain that.
Thank you. Through the chair, if this committee saw fit to refuse the third requested variance that dealt with height, then subject to the appeal provisions, the applicant could pull a building permit with an approved, this is hypothetical, approved variance 1 and 2. They would still meet compliance with the provision 3 up until such date that either the zoning bylaw amendment that is currently under appeal is either refused or withdrawn. If that happened tomorrow or any such day up until when the applicant obtains a building permit, they would do so in conformity with the bylaws. If it was withdrawn or refused, at that point, the bylaw as amended by council would be in full force and effect.
So maybe this is a question again, is should we separate our votes for variance number 1 and 2 and as one vote and variance 3 is another vote? I'm just wondering if by voting it on all 3, are we muddling this somewhat?
Okay, it's a good point. James, did you want to chime in on that?
Sure, and thank you through your chair. Just to expand upon what Ian said, this is being done for technical reasons at this point. Because this bylaw for variance number 3 is not technically in effect, there were changes made to the second residential unit policy, or regulations, I should say, through the amendments that were recently passed by council. Those are currently at the LPAT, and we did just get a partial decision on those. So this is why this type of decision is important. If you think about it holistically, sorry, I'm going to back up for a moment. Staff have reviewed this application and determined that the built form that's being proposed is appropriate for the site. So we do not have a concern with the height of the accessory building. What is being changed through the amendments to the second residential unit policies is a more firm height on second residential units that are detached, where there have to be a maximum height of 4.6 meters and 1 story. The reason this is important now is because we did just get a release from the Ontario Lands Tribunal, and it was a partial release. So the second residential unit provisions are under appeal, as well as the proposed maximum bedroom provisions that the city put forward for consideration. But the partial release for the entire decision only contained regulations relating to second residential units. And even within that, it didn't include the maximum height provision that was put forward at 4.6 meters. So we're still in discussion at the tribunal about the height of second residential units and the release of those provisions so they can be coming into effect. So we still have a process at the tribunal where, if we get those resolved within the next month or two, while this is still unbuilt and a permit hasn't been granted, our review in this, where we said that the height, the size, the general form of it is appropriate, if that decision all of a sudden came down and the regulations came into effect, they wouldn't be able to build this as proposed. So this is really a total package around this property by saying, yes, you know what, in our review, this is appropriate. We're preemptively heading off any sort of release from the OLT should this come into effect prior to releasing a building permit. We think it's appropriate. We don't want to penalize someone for being caught between two regulations, as one is in effect and one might be coming into effect. So that's why I think if we're looking at this approval tonight, we need to look at it in its totality rather in pieces.
Okay.
Fair enough.
That makes sense. Yeah. Somnath, you had a comment?
Yeah, I had the same concern as Paul. The dash 63 went into effect and is currently on the books. And according to that, 4.6 is the maximum allowable. Right. And the applicant is asking for 5.4. So that's on the table for our consideration. And the discussion that then got tacked onto it is that that dash 33 by the council is under review at the tribunal. So that's outside the scope, I would suggest, for us, but keeping in mind the interest of the applicant that they cannot do this project piecemeal, I would suggest that maybe it's a good idea to break it into two sections. The challengeable portion becomes a separate sort of a workflow or an administrative piece of paper, which doesn't impede the other two variances that is being requested. But that's the way I feel right now.
Okay, thanks for that. Greg, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Just for staff can confirm that there was no opposing correspondence from anyone in the neighborhood. Thank you.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so I think we're clear to move. Okay, Paul, I see your physical hand up.
I would just, I would like to see us separate the two motions. Variance number 1 and variance number 2 is one vote, and variance number 3 is a separate vote. It doesn't change anything. It just shows that we're separating this and that there's a condition on variance 3 that is I don't want to see it get lost as we move forward, because this is a conditional approval, is the way I read this staff report.
Right. Okay, that's a good comment. I think that's good to know, and when we come to the motion, we'll bring that up then.
Okay, fair enough.
I think there's definitely flavor for that. I see James, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, sorry, just a point of clarification. I think just so I can understand the framing of this approval tonight. What do you mean by a conditional approval? I just want to understand that just so I know how to respond through you, Chair, to Mr. Babin.
Not sure. Did you mean conditional approval or?
Sorry, I'm just looking at the wording here in the report. Additionally, in the event of final approval, it seems like it's almost the way it's worded. It's like a conditional. The way it's worded here, but I would not change the wording of the motion. I would keep it the same as it is here. I just wanted to separate the two. That's it.
Are we good on that?
Through you, Chair, I think so. I just want to stress that at the end of the day, the application has been reviewed in its totality, and this variance number 3 is almost administrative at this point because that height maximum currently doesn't apply to the existing development. So that's why you don't see a variance in there for the current in-place policies. This is for the event that the policies are being appealed are released.
I think that's kind of why we're afraid to tie all 3 together in the event. Is that, I get that? Okay, Vincent, you have a question or comment?
I just wanted to make sure that I get this properly. So the height currently before was more than what they're asking. So it would fall into where it would be approved, but a bylaw was passed where it limited the height to 4.6, and then somebody appealed it. And then we're just waiting the results. So technically right now, that bylaw is not into effect.
That's right.
And then in case the bylaw gets approved by the LPAT, then if they don't have a building permit, that means they won't be able to build that height unless they have the variance already put forward. Is the other option would be they would have to come before us again?
Yeah.
Before, okay.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. If variance number 3 wasn't granted to the development in the event that the OLT decision releases their regulations on accessory buildings, if a permit wasn't granted before those regulations came into effect, it would either have to be a redesign of the building or a reapplication to the Committee of Adjustment to have that height consideration reconsidered.
Right.
Okay, we're good. Okay, so then any other questions for applicant or the agent or staff? So what I'll do then is open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 310 Sydenham Street? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. Do we have any members of the public with us to speak to the application for 310 Sydenham Street? Please raise your virtual hand. And I'll ask one third and final time. Is anybody here with us this evening to speak to application 310 Sydenham Street? Please raise your virtual hand. And I see none. So I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for, well, first of all, for a motion. Okay, so moved by Greg and seconded by Paul. And did you want to clarify the motion?
Yes.
Is it all 3 or is it a basket?
I'd like to see it separated, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so Greg moved that. Are you okay, Greg?
I'm okay with that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so what we're looking at is variance 1 and 2 as one motion and variance number 3 as a second motion. Okay, and Vincent, you have your hand raised?
But if we're separating it, say if everyone votes the same on both, is it worth separating?
Sure.
If anybody is planning on voting differently.
You want to ask that question?
I guess so. Because
this is a jaunty discussion. This is great.
Yeah, I know, it's process. No.
Because if you're separating it because you want to vote on it differently, then I can understand. But if you're going to vote the same, then I don't see why the extra paperwork would be needed.
Through you, Mr. Chair, my intent is to vote in favor, regardless, either or.
Okay. And what, for the record, I would vote in favor of them all as well. I think, Paul, you're saying the same thing.
Same thing. It's more process.
I think it's more a process. I think it's more what if we get
Yes.
stumbled up in variance number 3 and it's tied up into the whole application, then all of a sudden they can't do anything. Whereas at least if we have 2 separate motions and for whatever reason, number 3 doesn't go in their favor at the end of the day, they can still move ahead with number 1 and 2. That's how I see it as well.
Yeah.
So we're okay. So right now we've got 2 motions. Well, so we'll deal with, I guess if there's going to be 2 motions. So Greg, not to put words in your mouth, so are you moving variance number 1 and 2, and Paul, you're seconding that? Okay, any discussion on that? So all in favor, raise your physical hand, and that's unanimously carried. All right, and then we have another motion for variance number 3. Does somebody want to move that? So moved by Paul and seconded by Somnath. Any discussion on that? All in favor, raise your physical hand, and that's unanimously carried. Thanks, everybody. And that was a jaunty discussion. Yeah. Okay, so that's that. That takes a case for our new business. We have no motions. Navigating through our agenda now, there are no notices of motion, no other business. We have no correspondence, and the date of the next meeting is December 13th at 5:30 p.m. Okay, so I guess all to do now is a motion to adjourn. Moved by Paul and seconded by Greg. All in favor, raise your physical hand. And that's unanimously carried. So meeting adjourned at 6:11 p.m. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next month. All right, take care.